All right. Well, thank you for joining, and I'm looking forward to spending some time this morning talking about understanding overthinking. So, we're really going to dig into what overthinking is, why we do it, and when to seek help when it becomes a real challenge for you. So, if any of these sound familiar, just, raise your hand either in real life or Zoom or type yes in the chat. Do you ever find yourself replaying conversations over and over again, where you go through every detail or every single thing that was said or done and wonder about maybe what you should have done differently? Or do you ever find yourself thinking through every possible outcome to a situation? Where you just try to imagine, well, what if this happens or that happens? And you try to just sort through all the different probabilities that could play out. Or do you ever find yourself just wishing you could turn your brain off? Because it just feels like no matter what you do, your brain keeps going and going. You might even feel like this meme here where you start overthinking about something before it's even happened, before it's even had a chance to play out. Your brain's already running away with all these different things that could pop up. Yeah, right. I know I relate to these myself too. Or even this experience where sometimes when we're overthinking, it feels like everybody else around us is completely underreacting, especially if some anxiety kicks in. You're like, wait a minute, no, I'm the one who's responding appropriately. You are not responding appropriately. Or even this experience where you get in bed at night and all of a sudden your brain is like, "Oof, hello, let's think of all the scary, upsetting things that we can worry about or what our biggest fears are." And you're like, I'm supposed to be relaxing. And now my brain has me all worked up and anxious, right? These are all really common experiences to have. Like I said, sometimes I feel this way myself, especially this middle of the night piece. Our days can be so busy that sometimes by the time we get to bed, it's like our brains go, finally, there's time to think through all of this. So let me introduce myself. I'm Ivy Griffin. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a licensed mental health therapist as well as a supervisor and the founder and director of Thrive Therapy and Counseling in Sacramento. And I really spent going on 2 decades of working with clients who are anxious and sensitive and overthinkers. And sometimes I fall into that category myself. And I see the struggles that can really come up in this realm of overthinking. And I see how hard it can be. And it's a topic we don't always talk about, which is why we've been doing some articles on our website about it, sharing with our newsletter, and why I really wanted to dig into this more today. I think a lot of times we overthink about things because we care so much and we really want to do the right thing or we want to be helpful to other people. And then it just goes too far and our brains go off track. So when we step back and go, okay, what actually is overthinking? First off, it's not a diagnosis. It's not anything you're going to find in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. It's that big book that has all the diagnoses we use in Western psychology. It's not in there, but it is a really common human experience. And it's something that comes up a lot in my work with clients and therapy sessions. And it's just something that we all deal with as humans sometimes. And when we're overthinking, we tend to have this experience of our thoughts feeling out of control. Kind of like our thoughts take on a mind of their own and they're just off to the races. Or it can feel like your thoughts become this runaway train where the train might be careening off the tracks and it feels really hard to know what to do to get it back and to feel in control again. When we're overthinking, we also tend to either replay conversations we've already had or rehearse future conversations over and over again. And this is that experience of like thinking about every single thing you said, or even how you stood, or what your body language was, or what facial expressions the other person made, and trying to sort through all the different meanings. We're trying to plan for that future conversation and imagine all the different scenarios and exactly what you could say to get the outcome that you want. And when we're overthinking, we often are fixating on the same issue. Now, don't get me wrong, we can fixate on a lot of different issues, but for kind of each experience or episode of overthinking, it's usually about one situation or one issue. And then we're just spinning and spiraling over that one issue again and again. It can also feel like your brain won't turn off when you're overthinking. If you're anywhere around my age, you might remember those Energize Your Bunny commercials, about the batteries that just keep going and going no matter what. I think our brains feel like that sometimes when we're overthinking, like nothing's going to stop it. They're never going to run out of juice. So, some of the things I hear people say when we're talking about overthinking are, I can't stop thinking about it. Again, that sense of powerlessness, or worrying about what if I said the wrong thing? What if I did the wrong thing? What if I upset the other person? Or having this sense of wanting to solve the problem, just being like, well, I just want to figure it out. I just want to know what the answer is. Or that feeling of, I wish I could stop, but I can't. I just can't seem to find a way to make it end. And a lot of times, overthinking starts for us as this tool to help us feel more in control or help us get to an answer. But then it really turns into an obstacle that keeps us from figuring out what we need. And so, a common question that comes up is overthinking anxiety? Is anxiety overthinking? Are they different? Are they one and the same? So, I like to think of anxiety as this big, broad umbrella term. And anxiety is a common human emotion. We all feel anxious sometimes. It might be that you're giving a presentation at work. I was feeling some nerves before this started. Or it might be that you need to have a conversation with your partner and you're afraid it's going to bring up conflict or feel difficult. So you feel some anxiety about that. Or it could even be something like we just have too much to do. That to do list is way too long, and the anxiety kicks in around that. And those are all just really common human experiences of anxiety, which are part of the umbrella. And then another part of the umbrella is where anxiety really becomes too much, where it's happening too frequently, it's too intense, it's affecting various areas of your life and making it hard to function. And that's really the realm of anxiety disorders, right? So there's just like common everyday anxiety, and then we can move into the realm of anxiety disorders if anxiety is really having a negative impact on our life. And then when it comes to overthinking, falls partially under the anxiety umbrella and partially outside. Right. So a lot of overthinking is related to anxiety. Sometimes they go hand in hand. We feel anxious and then our brain starts spinning. Or sometimes it goes the other way, that our brain starts spiraling and then we feel anxious. But there's also other things that can contribute to overthinking. If you've had any sort of traumas in your life, that tends to lead to hypervigilance, which can make us worry and overthink about a lot of situations trying to stay safe. Or if you have certain conditions like obsessive compulsive disorder, that has a tendency to overthink. And then there's also just things like certain personality traits tend to think about things more deeply and analyze more, which can lead to overthinking, as well as just it is a common human experience. So, anxiety umbrella, overthinking can be part of anxiety, but it can also be related to other things. And so when we talk about anxiety, it really has both physical bodily sensations for most people, as well as the thoughts that are going through our head. So it can include feelings of nervousness or tension, or those physical sensations like your heart is racing, you're sweating, you're shaky. But with everyday anxiety, usually the worry comes and goes. It might be like something happens at work and, oh, you're stressing about it a little bit, but then you deal with it, you send the email, you move on. It's not a big deal. And the everyday anxiety tends to connect to all sorts of different issues. It's not like focused on one area. And you can usually identify pretty clear triggers with everyday anxiety. Oh, yeah, I've got to talk to my partner and set that boundary, and I'm worried about how it's going to go. So I'm feeling anxious. There's more of a clear cause and effect. So, with overthinking, as we were talking about, it tends to be about fixating on one issue at a time. And then it's more of this endless loop, this endless replaying and ruminating where it feels like you're spinning your wheels. And the real key is that thinking, it doesn't bring solutions or relief. You just keep thinking, but it doesn't take you anywhere. And it may or may not have a clear trigger. Sometimes we do overthink about that problem at work that comes up. But other times it's that experience of waking up at 3 in the morning and overthinking about a conversation you had with your best friend 5 years ago. You're like, why am I even worrying about this now? Sometimes it can almost feel illogical and confusing when we're overthinking. So, huge question. Why do we do this? Why do our brains do this? Well, often we're trying to solve a problem, right? So our brains mean really well because they want to help us and they want to protect us. But then they go off the track. It becomes too much. And it's very enticing to think that we're going to come up with a solution to a problem that we have. That feels really good and satisfying. And we usually overthink about things that we're bothered by. So the idea of having a solution to them is like, yes, that's what I want. That's what I want to experience. So it leads to overthinking. We also overthink when our brain believes that there's danger. And this gets really tricky because, of course, as humans, we're animals, we're organisms, and we're wired biologically to survive. We also have this built in negativity bias where we look for problems around us. And our brains do that because they're trying to keep us safe. And that really had an evolutionary purpose when humans were more nomadic and we were on the go and we needed to look out for animals or other people who might harm us or even pay attention to deadly plants we might eat. Like there was this really a necessary reason for us to constantly look out for danger. But the catch is that in modern life, there's not a whole lot of situations every day that are actually life threatening. But sometimes our brains still act as if the situations we're in were life threatening, right? And they interpret danger, like life threatening danger, where there's not any. And then we start to overthink as this form of protection. We also overthink because it feels productive. I don't like to sit around doing nothing. And when I'm working towards solving a problem, it makes me feel good. Like I'm taking action, I'm doing this. But overthinking is like this catch 22 because it can feel like we're being productive, but it doesn't often help us get to the answer. I was thinking about like sharing this workshop today. And as part of it, I sat down, I thought about what information I wanted to share. I made notes, I researched, I created slides, I practiced, I put it all together. Right. And so there were all these different steps involved in this action plan of being productive. And when we're overthinking, we get stuck in that like very first part of it, this pre contemplation phase of taking action. And we just spin there, but we don't actually move on to the other steps to help us be productive or prepared for what we want to do. And that same idea, overthinking feels like preparation. It feels like we're making progress, but we're really not. And another big reason why we overthink is we want to control what is uncertain. Most of us as people do not like uncertainty, myself included. It tends to make me anxious when things are uncertain and I don't know what to expect. And so it's very satisfying to try to be in control and know what's going to happen. Part of that reason why we think about all the different outcomes to a situation. But all this thinking really is just an illusion of control. It doesn't actually give us more of a sense of an outcome. It just makes can enticingly feel that way, even if it doesn't help. So I also noticed that overthinking, it feels even more common now. I mean, I think we've all done this throughout human history, and yet it feels so prevalent now. And so I think there are a few reasons for this. One is as a society, we do tend to be more socially isolated than we have in the past. And when we're overthinking, it's a very internal process. It's like I'm in my head, things are happening in my head, but I'm not getting a lot of feedback from other people about it. And I was even thinking about how it's so much more common now for folks to work from home or have hybrid schedules, which can be really lovely and offer a lot of benefits. And yet, even in our work, sometimes we just aren't getting the everyday social interactions that we used to. And sometimes those social interactions are very grounding and get us out of this internal process. I also think social media plays a role here with overthinking. I know for so many of us, we go on social media and we share the things we want to remember. I do this. And I share vacation pictures and like the happy memories that I want to be able to look back on and have my memory pop up and, oh, yeah, that was a really good time. But it has that effect, though, that sometimes other people go on social media and they see that post and they go, wow, their life is great. They're doing all these wonderful things. What am I doing? I'm failing. I'm not enough. Right. And so that social comparison can lend itself really easily to spiraling and overthinking. Also, a lot of our communication these days happens via text or messaging, which again has pros. It can be super convenient and quick and easier to stay in touch with people, but we miss a lot of the cues of communication when, a message is only coming across in text. When we're talking to someone, right, there's a lot of nonverbals that happen. We see facial expressions, body language, gestures, tone of voice, how we stand, all those things come into play. And when we're texting, we only get the words and maybe an emoji here or there, but sometimes I still get confused by emojis and I don't know like what means what and how to interpret all of them. And I think sometimes other people feel that way too. So there's just a lot less information in a text. And it comes up fairly often in therapy sessions too, where clients will come in and you're like, okay, I had this text exchange. Can I read it to you? Can we talk about it? I don't know how to respond. There's a lot of thought that then goes into how to communicate when we just have this one piece of communication and writing. And then, of course, we all lead these really busy lives where we have constant input coming in. It's like we go to the grocery store now and you wait in line, and I'm on my phone doing something instead of daydreaming. We just have like input as we go throughout our days, and we're very reachable with text and email and social media and everything. And so sometimes there's just not much downtime. And then that can lead to like when you do have a quiet moment, your brain's like, finally, thank goodness I can think. And then it starts to spiral almost because it doesn't get a chance to do it otherwise. And so there are some common themes I see come up with overthinking. A big theme is self doubt. A lot of times when we're overthinking, we are questioning and doubting ourselves and wondering what we did wrong, what we should do differently. We might fixate on our mistakes. And that's true whether we really made a mistake or whether we just think that we made a mistake. And sometimes our overthinking brains will convince us that we did something wrong, even when we didn't, right? Or that uncertainty piece. We don't know how we want to respond. And then we're doubting, should I do this? Should I do that? We find it hard to trust ourselves. And we continue the thinking because we don't trust ourselves and we're not sure how to move forward. Also, we overthink because of this analysis paralysis. Sometimes we get so worried about being perfect or not doing the wrong thing that we keep thinking about what to do because we don't want to mistakenly pick the wrong option. And it's easier to just keep thinking than to act and have a chance of it not working out. So then we just stay stuck in the thoughts rather than moving forward. We also sometimes overthink to avoid painful emotions. In our culture in the US, we're often much more comfortable with logic and reason than we are with feelings. And so it can feel a lot more familiar and more comfortable to think about things than to actually let ourselves feel, especially when they're difficult emotions like grief or anger or jealousy. So we just lean into the thoughts rather than feeling. Another huge theme that comes up with overthinking is the social piece. Again, as humans, we're social creatures. Like we need other people. And this is true. I know sometimes if you're an introvert like myself, or if you're a highly sensitive person, it can feel like, well, I need people, but maybe not too much. But we really do need those relationships with people that we trust to support us, because that's just part of how we're healthiest as people. And because relationships are so crucial, it's natural that our brains tend to think about them a lot, and then that can lead to overthinking. And that can be anything from just worrying about your friendship or your relationship or a relationship with a coworker to questioning your reactions or other people's reactions or to even feeling this fear of loss of connection. Right? That's where the real threat can come in and where our brains can perceive danger. It's like, am I going to lose this person? And if so, that can feel really scary and even it might be a threat to my survival. And so then our brains tend to overthink to try to help us out. So, on this very topic, we actually just wrote an article that's posted on our website under our blog section about Am I Overthinking My Relationship? So, if this resonates with you, feel free to hop on there and check that out and see if you connect. And we've got some more articles to come about tools to help with it as well. And while we're talking about this relationship piece, I just wanted to mention this spiral we can get into when we're overthinking about relationships. And this can come up when you're in a new relationship and you've got all that positive new relationship energy and excitement. But it can also happen if you're in a relationship you've been in for a long time, too. It looks a little different, and yet we can still overthink things very easily. Right. And sometimes it goes quickly from being curious or excited or feeling happy and positive, and there's this shift into anxiety and worry. And that might lead us to start compulsively checking our messages or rereading texts or focusing on that conversation that we had before. Right. And then as we start to feel uncomfortable or uncertain, we might bring in our past experiences and start to think about that time that we got cheated on or that time we had a really bad fight with an ex. And we start to think, oh no, is this going to happen again? What do I need to watch out for? And then we can even feel guilty because we're like, why am I doing this? Nothing has happened. Maybe I'm doubting my partner, or maybe I'm creating this fight where none exists. And then we start to doubt ourselves. And then sometimes that doubt leads right back into the overthinking. So it can be a really tough spiral when we get into this, which makes it so important to find your ways out and to find the things that can help. So there are many things we can do to help with overthinking, but for our purposes in this short workshop today, I'm just going to hit on a couple of them. The first one is journaling. And when I say journaling, this can be like free form writing. It can be notes you put in your phone. It can be actually having a journal you open and hand write in. But it can also include following journaling prompts. But however you approach it, the key to journaling is that it helps to slow down runaway thoughts. Because for many of us, we can type, or actually we think faster than we type or write things out. So just the act of getting the thoughts from our head onto something externally slows us down, which is helpful when we're caught in that spiral. And then the act of seeing our thoughts either on paper or on a screen gives us some distance, right? It makes the thought external. And that can give us a sense of perspective about what's happening. And just putting that thought outside of us can also interrupt this repetitive cycle that we get caught in. And then the second tool that's really helpful with overthinking is mindfulness. And the real key with mindfulness is that when you are practicing it, you're focusing on the here and now. You're all about the present moment. And mostly with overthinking, we're either worrying about the past or we're fixating on the future, right? So it's totally different to just stop and be present and notice what's happening right now. Mindfulness also usually encourages you to notice your body sensations. And when we're overthinking, we're often so caught up in our heads, right? We lose track of our bodies because we're just so caught up in that thought process. And so noticing your body sensations is another way of interrupting that and creating a different experience. And mindfulness itself just tends to reduce the sense of urgency, like lets you be, lets you notice what's happening, and gives space so you don't have to have an answer right away. And then, like we've been talking about, because overthinking, it can be such an internal process and it can be isolating when we're stuck in our heads, it's really helpful to talk to somebody else about whatever the issue is you're overthinking about, because it gives you a reality check. You can see how someone else reacts, especially when you're talking to a person you trust, right? And you can get their feedback, see their reaction, and that can help ground you and give you perspective. I also notice sometimes in therapy sessions, even a client will talk about something that's going on, and then they'll say, like, oh, yeah, now that I'm saying this out loud, huh, maybe that's not what I want to do, or maybe there's something different here. And that's because it just feels different, right? To say it out loud and get that distance from what you're overthinking about. So Those are three really helpful ways to practice interrupting the pattern. We've also got another great article written by our therapist, Megan Bell, on journal prompts to quiet overthinking. So, many different ways you can do this. But if you hop on over to our website under the blog section in overthinking, you can find this article. And I'll just mention like two of my favorite ones that are on here for today. The first one is TOM. It stands for thought, opposite, middle. And so, what this does is it shifts the experience with overthinking because so often we're focused on the worst possible outcome. We're catastrophizing, right? We're like, oh, that's going to happen. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to be homeless. Right? It's this whole terrible chain of events. So, you start with that thought that you're really afraid of, but then you have to make yourself also identify what's the opposite of that thought. What if the situation goes well, right? What if there wasn't a problem? And then you identify what's the middle ground here. If it's not the worst and it's not the best, what's something in the middle? And just the experience of that can help you remember that there's a whole range of possibilities that can happen, right? It's not just one way or the other. And then the other prompt I absolutely love is writing like you're getting advice from a friend. I notice so often that many of us like talk to ourselves like we're giving ourselves tough love. Something goes wrong and we go like, "Oh my god, I was so stupid. What an idiot. Why would I do that? I'm such a failure." Right? And then you think about if you're talking to a friend who is stressing about the same situation, you would never say those things to your friend, right? You'd be like, "That's so mean. I would never say that." So instead, this is about intentionally practicing speaking to ourselves the way we would to a friend and offering that kindness and that empathy and validation. Oh, that's so hard. That's a really tough situation, but I see how insightful you are. I see how much you're working to solve it. It's a whole different experience of how we talk to ourselves. And the act of doing that can play a powerful role in quieting overthinking. So, I just also want to mention some warning signs of when it could be really helpful to seek professional help, either through something like therapy or coaching. If overthinking is happening often and it's affecting your daily life, and by affecting your daily life, I mean it's really having a ripple effect across multiple areas of your life. Maybe you're overthinking about a fight with your partner, but then you go to work and you're having trouble focusing and concentrating, and you get behind on a project, and then you feel really stressed that evening, and it's hard to relax. And then you're tired, but you go to bed and you can't fall asleep, right? It's this kind of ripple pattern of it's not even just the overthinking, but all these other ways it's impacting you. Another warning sign can be the amount of time that you're spending doing this. If you find you're just spending significant amounts of time every day or many days of the week caught up in this overthinking, that's a sign that it could be really beneficial to seek help. And then also, if you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck, or you've been trying different things to stop and it just feels like nothing's really worked, that's also a good time to seek help so you don't have to keep repeating those same patterns. Yeah, and I just like to remind us all that it is okay to need support. Again, living in our culture in the US, we tend to be very independent, right? And sometimes it's looked down on to seek help. I think that's changing some with younger generations, but it can still be a hard hurdle to overcome. And sometimes there's this idea that independence means we're strong, that if we can do it on our own, we're the strong ones. And if we reach out to anyone else, then we must be weak. And that's just not true. Again, we're social creatures and we really do need the support of other people. We all need help sometimes. Life is hard and being human is hard. And so I just want to give that reminder that you don't have to struggle alone. And then I also like to remember that mental health is a lot more like physical health than we always keep in mind, right? Like with our physical health, no one says, okay, I went to the gym one time. Now I'm ready to go run that marathon. Like, no, of course you can't do that. Or no one says, like, okay, I ate my salad for lunch today, so I'm not going to worry about what I eat for the rest of the month. Right? We know like it's something you have to do daily. That's an ongoing practice. And mental health is really the same. Like we all need our tools and supports that we do on a regular basis to help us stay healthy and maintain our well being. And sometimes reaching out for therapy can just be one of those tools that helps you stay healthy. So, the takeaways today that I just want to share is to remember when we're overthinking, it's really about our brains having this overactive safety system trying really hard to help us. They're trying hard to solve a problem and protect us, and they take it too far, right? But there is good news that you can find relief and you can learn to notice your thoughts without getting pulled in, right? This doesn't have to be a pattern that you stay stuck in forever. And it's very common to struggle in this area, so please know that you're not alone. Well, I know I've been talking a lot, sharing a lot with you, so now we're going to shift into our question and answer portion for today.